we all just watched Get Back, and
Yeah, we all did,
cut.
definitely.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Playback. My name is Nate.
My name is Brandon, and Nate, today we are here to talk about Rubber Soul by the Beatles. This is an album that you chose, album that we both have listened to many times. On this listen through, what were your impressions of Rubber Soul?
It is one of the greatest albums ever made. A perfect 10 out of 10 that is somehow underrated. How about yourself, Brandon?
For myself, my impression was I remember it sounding much more like later Beatles than it does. It's like, wow, this has the vestiges of the teeny bopperness way more than I remember it having.
Yes.
Why did you choose Rubber Soul?
Well, it's an album that is one that we both have heard a million times. We both love. But like I said a second ago, despite it being so well loved and so highly regarded and held close to the vest by so many musicians and people we look up to, and not to mention all the critics and fans have so much love for this album, but it is kind of weirdly underrated when you compare it to Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, The White Album, and Abbey Road.
Everything else
after it. So it's this really amazing. It's an amazing nucleus. It's an amazing focal point to turn your attention to because it really shows the birth of the Beatles as we know them now. As we think of them in our minds, this is the beginning of that. And for that reason, It's a fascinating album to dive into.
I definitely know what you mean when you say that now that their whole catalog is complete, I'm sure it felt different at the time when this album first came out. It must have been understood and listened to in the context of all of their other albums before this point. But now, in the post-Beatles world, it feels like it's the first one of the main run of albums that we still really seriously listen to.
Yes. Yeah, I think you could divide their discography up in half, and you could go pre-Rubber Soul and post-Rubber Soul. If you think about it, Help, which is the album that directly precedes this one.
Right before this one, yeah.
That Help feels like the culmination of the Beatles as a project, as far as the British invasion goes. Even like the movie that came, like the Help, the movie that came out.
The pop teenager trap.
Yes.
Machine.
Absolutely. It's like they are like, Help is it's the final form of them as like this Backstreet Boys-esque.
Fully formed.
It's they have Voltron into like this pop monolith at that point, and it's
even kind of like in those poses on the cover of Help, they're like
and even just like calling the album Help, it's like, fuck, what do we do after? Like, where do we go from here? You know what I mean? Like they took that thing as far as you could possibly go, and that thing being, we're a British invasion band. All the girls scream and run down the street when we walk by. We portray ourselves that way as well in media. So in our movies, we depict that. We want that.
That's the whole thrust of it. That's the whole aim.
Yeah.
Like, that's what this project is.
Yes. And
Is a teenager trap.
yeah. And we're 4 dudes with mop tops that play live shows. Even though they, I believe, kept playing live shows after Rubber Soul was not recorded with live performance in mind at all.
Right.
These songs were composed in the studio and using studio techniques that in a lot of ways would have made these borderline impossible to play live. Some of them. Like I think of like on Nowhere Man, there's that like insane like fucking harmonium solo in the middle of the song, which to me almost sounds like totally out of nowhere. Like
man.
Yeah. There's just things they're doing on this record that it's the start of them in that second phase, which is we're a studio band now and we do a lot of drugs and we're not little teeny bopper kids anymore.
Yeah. It's very easy to see how there are 2 Beatles eras. At the widest view you could take, there's 2 major eras. There's the teeny bopper thing and the, artist phase, right? Those 2 phases. And it's easy to see that Rubber Soul is the dividing point between those 2. But the trippy thing about Rubber Soul to me is that it belongs in both.
Right.
So, like, now, the albums that I feel like people really spend time listening to, the Beatles, is the later phases, all the artistic stuff, everything that Rubber Soul and everything after. And Rubber Soul is one of those. It counts.
Yes.
It has Norwegian. It has sitar on it.
Yep.
It's like you say, it's a studio album.
They still have mop tops though.
Right.
It is still technically kind of
and the majority of the songs are still that same thing that they had been doing, which is just, we're copying Black American soul music, which is what the title is all about, Rubber Soul.
Yes.
Right?
Rubber Soul, which, okay, tell me. All right. I'm an idiot.
All right.
Okay, I am dumb.
True.
Frequently things go over my head. Even things as blatant and obvious as calling your album Rubber Soul because you're influenced by Stax and Motown.
I didn't get that.
I didn't get it up until
I
literally
did not get that.
Up until like today, frankly.
Yeah, I always thought it was like some surrealistic pillow, fucking stupid mid-60s, was pick 2, pineapple hat. That I seriously thought that's how much thought went into the name Rubber Soul.
Yeah, it's a direct reference to Plastic Soul, which is something that they would call like white British blues boys, like the Stones, like Jagger, Van Morrison. Yes. But they were Brits and they don't have that X factor, which is being black in the United States in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly. That little thing.
Yeah, that small
it's
little
kind of
tiny thing.
That little bitty change. It's not the same.
It's interesting to me that they decided to name the album after, they're using the album title Rubber Soul to point out that soul music was a big influence on this record. Something that occurred to me today, re-listening to this record, the amalgamation of all their influences, to me, just sounds like the Beatles. And never until I've really tried to think about their music analytically on this record, like I am with this video, have I been able to like parse all the influences.
Yeah.
Because up until doing this, to me, all those sounds, that's just what the Beatles sound like.
Yep.
But when you really break it down, this record in particular, they're trying to do soul, there's country, there's like Tin Pan Alley, and like Baroque pop stuff. There's folk rock, like the Byrds kind of influence.
Yep. There's Byrds in there.
And it's the start of the big Eastern influence from like Indian music with Harrison and everything. But for the most part, they managed to meld all these influences together on this record so well that I've never been able to pull them apart before.
It definitely sounded different doing this listen through.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard this record probably 500 times.
Same.
And I never heard their influences as clearly as I heard them this time. Because just like you're saying, I can completely relate to that. Every other time that I listened to Rubber Soul before this, it just sounded like, oh, that's the Beatles.
Right.
And that's what music in the mid-60s sounded like, period. That's what music from England sounded like at the time, period. Like almost as if there's just this style of music that people were playing at the time that just existed in isolation, existed in a bottle. But this was the first time where I could really hear who they're taking this stuff from.
Yes.
You know?
And I never, up until this point, I never identified soul as something I had to listen for in the Beatles. Like,
for me personally, I think it's because I learned about soul music and what it is and developed an ear for it and learned about the history of it after I was already a Beatles fan who had heard Rubber Soul and all these albums a million times.
For sure. Yeah, you're right. Because I think if you were if you had flipped that relationship, basically, and you were a big soul fan coming into listening to Rubber Soul for the first time, I think it would be fairly obvious a lot of the things that they were trying to take from, like, the Four Tops or Smokey Robinson or Sam Cooke or Otis Redding, like whoever. But
Booker T and the MGs.
Booker T, big time.
Dude, oh my God.
The other cool thing about all the disparate genre influences on this record is I feel like each member of the band perfects a different genre in their own right on this record.
Mm-hmm.
I think Michelle is like the perfect like Baroque pop McCartney tune.
Mm-hmm.
I think What Goes On is the perfect Ringo country tune. I think you have like the perfect Dylan Birds influence songs, like with Nowhere Man, with Lennon, and then what's the big Harrison tune on this record? Yeah, If I Needed
Someone, or okay.
If I Needed Someone, another great, like, kind of birdsy sounding song.
So birdsy.
But also
them jangling guitars and everything.
Also, the drony nature of If I Needed Someone kind of reminds me of the Eastern influences that George was starting to bring in.
Yeah, right. He's got like open ringing strings in that riff.
And I would even say, Think for Yourself, the other Harrison song on this record. According to the books, I didn't read any fucking books for this. Okay, I'm not even gonna pretend I read a book for this.
You were just about to say.
I read a passage of a book.
Okay, according to this paragraph.
According to a single passage I read in one book.
In a book.
That's in a single book.
In a book.
Harrison was the true like soul nerd of the group.
Really?
Apparently, Harrison had like the deepest knowledge of soul. They all loved it, and they all wanted to do it, but Harrison was the biggest like nerd about soul. And I think you could argue, Think for Yourself, Harrison nails the soul vibe better than anybody on the record.
Dude, okay. I had such a different take on this. Okay. So my notes for both of those songs are that in comparison to all the Lennon and McCartney songs that are on here, that are
you're either about to make me really happy or piss me off right now.
They're all just various degrees of either sort of or completely ripping off soul music.
Okay, yeah.
In comparison to that, to me, the two George songs are the most something else
Okay.
and not ripping off soul.
I think that's fair because he does manage to blend styles better than those guys do.
So, but what you're saying about that he's the biggest soul nerd is blowing my mind right now.
Yeah.
because maybe the reason why Lennon and McCartney's sound so much more egregious is because of how much more superficial their understanding of the music is.
Yes.
And if George is kind of like taking a deeper cut at it and is more of like a deeper fan of it, he's now on a level where he's like doing some original expression in this area,
Like
rather than just copycatting and that's all that I can do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like just like the vibe of it, the like harmonic signature of it, like what the way that the idea of the song is being presented. I'm mainly talking about "Think for Yourself."
Yeah.
Is like I'm trying to imagine a Stax artist singing it. I'm trying to imagine William Bell or like trying to imagine an American black artist singing this song, and I'm like, I can't picture it. It would sound like a Beatles cover.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's hard to imagine. From a songwriting perspective, yes, I agree with you. But I think from like
mainly the songwriting is what I'm talking about.
Yes. But I think from like an arrangement perspective and like the choices they made on the recording, like think about like the middle section where there's just that fat tambourine like going during that song. That sounds like pure soul to me.
So the two George songs on this album to me really felt like I could hear George's later style coming a lot in these two songs.
I think in If I Needed Someone for sure.
Dude, the intro is like the baby version of the intro of Here Comes the Sun.
Yeah.
You know, it's the guitar thing, bleeding down, just going around on it one time. Boom, dun, 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 dun. Both Think for Yourself and If I Needed Someone. They have all the hallmarks of the songwriting that's on what's it called? The greatest album ever made?
Sgt. Pepper's.
No.
That's the one.
You know, the greatest album ever made.
Pet Sounds?
Oh, All Things Must Pass.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Is relegating George Harrison to 2 songs per Beatles album like music's original sin? Like, is that like the greatest sin?
The worst thing that was ever done. Well, but there's the whole like, is there the other side of the coin, which is like George wouldn't be George, and like it wouldn't have turned out that way if they hadn't done it. You know what I mean?
All Things
like,
Must Pass wouldn't exist if they had let
was
him.
Was it the pressure that made the diamond type of a thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the answer. But
I personally
it's one of those.
I think when you're a kid, it's really easy to love McCartney or Lennon. But as I've gotten older, it becomes even more clear to me that George was as brilliant, if not more so, than them. And it just happens that because he was the youngest, because he wasn't as musically proficient as Paul McCartney, I guess, that they relegated him to the side. And it drives me crazy because sometimes I listen to Beatles records that are perfect, and I'm like, you know what would make this more perfect is if there was another George song. I just wish I wish it was more of a trifecta. I wish it was like each one of them had a third, you know, rather than George had a quarter, if that, really. Because they don't go to India without George Harrison. They don't do all this sitar and tabla stuff on Sgt. Pepper's without going to India and without George specifically going out of his way to learn Eastern music with Ravi Shankar. And that's such a major aspect of the Beatles. And that is George. And pre-Rubber Soul, I don't know if there's anything I could point out that I'd be like, they wouldn't be that way if it wasn't for George Harrison.
There are 2 great rites of passage in our culture. The first one is when you realize that your father is just a guy. And the second is when George Harrison becomes your favorite Beatle.
Fuck yeah, dude. I totally agree with you. Because, yeah, George is my favorite Beatle. I think he is. It's like the ultimate crime that he was pushed down that much, in this group. Drives me crazy.
That's a really good point, man. I mean, what other musician is there that's on the level of Prince and Michael Jackson and David Bowie and
Paul McCartney and John Lennon?
The triple A plus tier, where a constant factor of their career is being marginalized. Not by society.
No.
Not by politicians.
By his own band members.
Yeah, like within the project that he was working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is any other.
Like I mean,
maybe Brian Wilson.
Yeah.
Brian fucking
Really?
Wilson. Yes, I think Brian Wilson is the other one.
I thought he was the McCartney of that band. I thought he was the one who was like fucking
he was
ruled the Beach Boys with an iron fist.
No.
I don't know nearly as much about the Beach Boys as I do about the Beatles.
Brian Wilson, basically, he was too brilliant to ignore at a certain point, right? And interesting dovetail that connects with Rubber Soul. Brian Wilson heard Rubber Soul and said,
Yes.
"Holy shit, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. I need to make something as good as this." And then went on and made Pet Sounds. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to talk about the Beach Boys connection with this album. And I want to hear a lot about what you think, because I know that you know way more about the Beach Boys than I do. But for me, as someone who's way more familiar with the Beatles than I am with the Beach Boys, and really the only Beach Boys album, like as an actual album that I know, is Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
I know Pet Sounds very well. I don't know the rest of their albums. Tell me what you think about this theory. To me, the songs Michelle and Girl,
Yeah.
those are basically the same song. But one of them Paul wrote and one of them John wrote. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like they were both, it's like if you put an assignment in an envelope and you like hand it to multiple people, like, and they don't realize that they've been given the same task.
Yes.
Like they both came back with that song.
Same answer.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, let me just write a song about just the way that this girl has got my brain wrapped around her finger. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like completely helpless and captivated, and like I can't see or hear the entire rest of the world. I'm just like obsessed with this girl. And it's got to be acoustic, and it's got to have ooh-ahs in the back, and it's got to be real close to the microphone and real intimate. And it's the same song, except just one of them John wrote and the other one Paul wrote.
Interesting.
And even an element of like, we gotta be in a fencing match with the Beach Boys here.
Okay. I think that's interesting, although this album is the opening shot of the Beach Boys, Beatles, not feud, but like them influencing each other.
The back and forth.
Yeah, of the back and forth.
The conversation.
Yeah. I think you could be right about that, though, because, I mean, up until 1965, I mean, the Beach Boys were, up until that point, they were still amazing. Even before Pet Sounds, they were still the most beautiful group of male singers that were white, who were singing together more than the Beatles, I think.
They were a beautiful group of singers, and their voices sound really good too.
Yeah. The Beach Boys were hot as fuck. That's what I was trying to say. No.
I just don't know, like, what you got to do in life to get to a point where that many small things that happen to you are getting documented, written about, recorded down, passed from person to person. You know, like whenever somebody's like featured on a TV show or something, and it's like da 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 Ringo Starr biographer. I'm like, can you imagine if there was like a field, a profession out there,
college courses
called Nate Bridges biographers? Which Nate Bridges biographer? You know, like.
I couldn't imagine.
No, I would love that, dude. I think that.
What if it was about me? Or if it was about you?
I think that would be dope. I was mainly thinking that if it was about me.
Okay.
But that's what I was thinking about. But no, that would be dope if they were about you too. But only if they're about me and you.
See, I think that
I would probably be jealous if they were about you and not about me.
I understand.
I feel jealous.
I understand the curbside appeal of what you're getting at. That on the surface, oh my God, that's so cool. That must mean that I have lots of money and I'm famous. And obviously, if I have money and I'm famous, I'm probably really good at what I do. I'm probably. It must be an incredible situation. To me, I think when I think about the Beatles and the way they interacted with the world on a daily basis up to this day, it sounds like a living hell in a lot of ways to me.
Meeting anybody when you're Paul McCartney.
Everyone on earth knows who you are, and if they say they don't, they're lying to you.
And it's a religious experience to meet you.
And they cry.
No matter what.
They cry. They break down in tears. They call their entire family. They try and get you to call their entire family. Photos.
Just in whatever way. It is one of the most significant moments
of your
in
life.
Their entire life.
Yeah.
Whenever they meet you.
I stood next to Ringo Starr once, and I will never forget it.
Exactly.
I didn't even talk to him. I didn't meet him. I stood next to him while I held an iPod.
Yep. I was in the same room once as Paul McCartney, and like the image is burned into my brain.
Yes.
I can still see it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think there's a level below that where you could still have your own biographer. I don't think you got to go full.
I love that is your that's your mountaintop.
It's on a list, like finish doing the dishes, clean the cat's litter box, acquire biographer, and then in parentheses S ? Multiple biographers.
Oh man. Actually, I had someone bring up a really interesting point.
What's that?
And they said, who is the most famous man who's ever lived? And I said, okay, if I'm thinking about it, probably Jesus Christ is probably the most famous man who's ever lived. And he goes, nope. And I went, who? And he goes, Santa Claus. And I was like,
do you think Santa Claus is a man who lives?
No, okay, well, that's true. That's a really good point. But I said, okay, let's pretend for a second. Okay, well, do you think Jesus Christ is a man who really lived?
That's not part of refuting it. Like, no, Easter Bunny, bro. All right, sorry, go ahead.
Well, you could make the same argument about Jesus, but let's not go there. I don't want this to turn into... then we have to talk about John Lennon, too, if we go there. But
right, yeah, exactly.
But I said, okay, all right, you got me. Why? Why Santa Claus? And he goes, think about it, bro. Jesus Christ started 2,000 years ago. If this is the top, it's taken Jesus Christ 2,000 years to get to this point where he's the most famous man on earth. If arguably...
Like he only just recently became the most...
Whatever. Let me make my fucking stupid Santa Claus point. And he said, okay, now you take Santa Claus. How long has Santa Claus been around? And I was like, I don't know, 100 years or something. And he goes, yeah, and he's on equal footing with Jesus. Santa Claus started here and just rocketed to the top. So you could argue Santa Claus has had this exponential rise in popularity.
No,
so he is set
he's
to
beaten
surpass...
by Mickey Mouse. He's beaten by Mickey Mouse, dude.
Only by a hair. Only by a couple decades.
Oh, that sounds like the dumbest conversation. Yeah. That's amazing. I
can't remember who was talking about.
I'm jealous.
Yeah.
I don't have enough people coming up to me and saying stuff like that.
Okay, back to the Beatles.
Okay, I want to talk about some less obvious ways in which Rubber Soul is a turning point. Did you know that the song Nowhere Man is the very first Beatles song to be about something other than a relationship between boys and girls?
I saw that in my research as well. Fascinating.
Every single song, all of them are about boy-girl relationships in some way. And Nowhere Man is the first song
You know, my instant
to
reaction.
be about anything other than that.
My instant reaction. I read that today as well, and my first reaction to that was like, "That's bullshit," and let's keep going because I'm like, "That's insane. That's
It's insane.
insane if that's true."
But you look at it, and it's true, and it is the only song on all of Rubber Soul that is about something other than a boy-girl relationship.
Right.
Blows my mind. So it's the first Beatles song to feature a character,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And that is rolling a grenade into the Beatles music room and just blowing everything up, because the very next album, Revolver, starts with Taxman,
Right.
then Eleanor Rigby,
Right.
then everything that comes after that, Rocky Raccoon.
Right.
Fucking,
They do
how
so
many
many
Beatles
after
songs
that.
are there with characters?
Right. They do
how many?
so many.
Like a million.
Which is why my gut reaction to reading that was like, no. Because there's so many. There's so many Beatles
There's
songs
so many.
that aren't just about boy, girl, fall in love.
There's one about a goddamn meter maid.
Yeah, that's true. There's one about an octopus.
Yes.
One about a submarine.
There's one about a dude who kills people with a fucking hammer that is made out of silver.
Another reason why I like my guttural reaction to that was like, this is bullshit, is because oftentimes, like in my role as like a music producer, like if I'm consulting with songwriters, I always tell them like, make your songs about literally anything. They don't have to be about love.
To diversify.
Diversify your bonds or whatever, you know? Diversify your portfolio of songwriting cliches. It doesn't have to be about boys and girls falling in love. And I would point to the Beatles. Except everything up until this one, I would be totally wrong about.
All the way up through Rubber Soul minus one song.
Yeah.
It's about one thing.
Insane.
Well, I mean, look, inside of that, it's some of them are about breakup.
Yeah,
some of them are about I miss you. Some of them are about I just met someone and I'm very excited. Some of them are about we've been together for a very long time. Whatever.
Yeah.
But they're all about relationships.
Yeah. Speaking of songwriting themes, does John Lennon want to like blow his brains out on this record? Like,
isn't that kind of a constant with John Lennon?
I guess so, but he also wrote All You Need Is Love. I mean, he wrote Across the Universe. He wrote Imagine. He's responsible for a lot of, he wrote Give Peace a Chance. I mean, he wrote a lot of songs that are very hopeful and uplifting. I mean, maybe cynical in some ways.
Right. Those are like the magicalness that love could be, but his feet are in a shit world where it's not. And he's talking about, fuck you guys, let's do love. You're not doing love enough.
Right.
You assholes.
Right.
I hate you, love.
Right.
I hate you.
Outward, he projects outward anger onto the world. He's mad at the world. That's a hallmark of Lennon, especially after this. But before this and up to this
mad
one,
at his mom, bro.
He's mad at himself. He fucking hates himself.
That's what Nowhere Man is, right? He's singing about himself.
Norwegian Wood is a song about dude. Really the subtext of that song is he had an affair with someone outside of his marriage, and he obscured the lyrics in such a way so that it would be hard to tell what the fuck he was actually saying.
He could sing about it without getting caught.
Without getting caught cheating on his wife, yeah. But in the song, it's like they go into the woods, and then she kind of says no, and he's kind of he's rebuffed by her, and he's a little upset by that, and then he lights the cabin on fire and burns it down.
Wait, so then he must have done the last song, the murder song.
Okay,
Run for Your Life.
I was getting there. That's
the murders. Oh, okay.
Run for Your Life, like arguably the most
murder song,
misogynist, horrible fucking song in their whole catalog.
It's pretty intense.
It's really intense,
yes.
And to me,
it's more murderous than Maxwell's Silver Hammer, which is about
murder,
a serial murder spree.
Specifically about murder, yeah. Yes. I mean, to me, if there is, I've gone so many different ways on Run for Your Life, and I think we have to talk about Run for Your Life, because at this point, that's
let's talk about Run for Your Life.
We should cue like alarm bells and like sirens going off right now. It's problematic.
Problematic
song alert. Oh no, the whole album's bad now. We have to talk about it because it's John Lennon at his worst, and I don't mean as a songwriter. I mean like as a guy, like.
Well, it's so, but there is the question of is he singing as a character, or is he in the same breath as like, ooh girl, I love you girl, this is me, the guy singing, this is what I feel, and then turn and go, ooh girl, I'm gonna kill you if you go with another guy, and this is me singing here, or is it like some kind of, is he playing, is like singing as some alternate persona?
Even if we were to give him benefit of the doubt and say he was take him out of the equation, just look at the song on its own merits.
Yeah,
it's a really violent, misogynist, controlling. It's a red flag. It's a gigantic red flag of a song. I mean, it's like, I don't want to be around this guy, whoever is singing this fucking song.
Because there's no hook, there's no reveal, there's no little poetic turn at the end that kind of
there's no irony to it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there's nothing.
There's nothing. No,
there's nothing ironic about it. There's no joke.
It just is what it is, and then it's over.
Yeah,
and then the album's
over.
Yeah. Talk about the whole like primacy recency thing, like wow them in the beginning, wow them at the end. Like if you nail the beginning and you nail the end, the whole thing is just great.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. And with the fuck is that song called? The greatest song ever made. What is it called?
All Things Must Pass.
No. A Day in the Life.
Oh, okay. Jeez.
God.
God.
Like, wow him at the end. No, Rubber Soul ends
so abrupt
with Run for Your Life, and then it's over.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's really brutal. And if there's one thing I would dock on this album, it would be that. It's not that the song is bad. The lyrics are scary. And if you take them in any way literally, they're scary. And I think, it points to the bizarre dichotomy that is John Lennon, and how much of a problem he is as an iconic figure. Like end it with Michelle or something, or fucking, what else could we end it with?
Yeah, what would be
If I Needed Someone, the one right before this. End it with that one. Holy shit, that's like the perfect song to end it with.
Possibly the last thing that I'm going to talk about Rubber Soul is there is such a wide variety of different guitar sounds and drum sounds and piano sounds and vocal sounds. Like for each song, it's like, so on Nowhere Man, the lead guitar part it's in the left ear on the stereo mix, and then the one that plays like the solo, it's like compressed to shit. It is so completely compressed. The lead guitar part that's in Michelle is all like, all the treble is rolled off.
There's big jangly 12 strings.
So obviously, like we were talking about, by the time we were in high school, we were listening to the Beatles, and we were listening to a lot of music that was from the 60s and older than that and everything. But most directly influenced by what we were hearing in terms of music that was made more near the time when we grew up.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is like a point of pride about records that are made like in the 90s and certainly in the 2000s is how cohesive the guitar sound can be across the entire album. You know,
Yes.
like it's, and I think a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is to make.
That might be the first thing you do when you're making a record is let's get the drum sound down for the whole record.
Exactly.
Let's
To take drums that were recorded at different times on different days in different rooms in different studios with different microphones through different consoles, maybe with different drum kits.
It's like stressing me out hearing you describe it like that.
And then some records that were played by different drummers, you know, like it's not even the same actual physical drums that are being played. But like at that time when we were growing up and when we were learning the right way to produce a record, it's like they all have to sound the same.
Yes.
You can't have the drum sound change from song to song. Or, you know, in rock music, you can't have the guitar sound change from song to song.
If you want to present a group of songs as a cohesive album,
yes,
that's one of the first things you got to do is
this.
And it goes for everything.
Yeah.
Get the drum sound down. Pick the guitars you're going to use. You know, pick like the main guitars, the main amps you're going to use. Pick the vocal mic you're going to use. Right?
Exactly. You got to nail down the way that you're going to be miking the guitars. And if there's two guitar players in the band, you got George, you got John.
Set the levels.
Like, okay, we're going to record your guitar like this through this amp with these microphones, and your guitar we're going to record through this amp and with these microphones for the whole album. So that's those were the rules. That was the right way in the era where we were learning how to make a record. This is the complete opposite of that. Every song has, and you can tell, like purposefully chosen, purposefully crafted, and even like purposefully made unique and made different. Like, let's grab some knobs and just move them so that it sounds
super different. So
that we can be sure that this is a sound that we haven't had on this album yet. You know?
Yeah. And every song does that.
Every song does that. Yeah.
And yet, do you know what I'm about to say? And yet, it's so cohesive.
Yes. Rubber Soul sounds like Rubber Soul. These songs, you can play them up against Beatles songs from different albums. It's like, nope, that's a Rubber Soul song.
Yeah, you wouldn't. You would not confuse anything from this record.
How do they achieve that? If they're putting so much effort into this is honestly a mystery to me. I don't know the answer to this.
I think
if they put that much effort into changing the sound so much from song to song to song, how do they get the cohesion?
I think it's because in a lot of ways, the recording as a science, I'm not saying it had peaked yet, but the best people who will ever do it were doing it at this time.
It's at EMI Studios,
Yeah.
Which was called Abbey Road Studios after it. These dudes were scientists.
Yes. Literally wearing lab coats. Put a picture of them wearing lab coats up right now.
All of the gear that they were using to produce these, they made that gear. They got some metal and some components,
capacitors,
and they built it.
Yeah. Magnets and shit, however that works.
Yeah. But then how come this album sounds unique and cohesive as compared to another album that was recorded in the same studio like 6 months later?
By like a different band, you mean?
Even by the same band. Why does this sound it sounds unique compared to a song from Revolver?
Here's what I think. I think because one, you had arguably the greatest producer of all time at the helm, right?
Yeah.
Steering the whole ship in George Martin. And George Martin, I think, as the purveyor of everything, over all the songs, over everything they're doing, he never loses sight over the ultimate sound in the end that he's trying to achieve, as dictated by the Beatles, right?
Yeah, right. You've got one mind that is controlling the way that it
for all the kids, he's the Kevin Feige of the Beatles cinematic universe. Kevin Feige being the George Martin of our time.
Fuck it.
Well, Brandon, that was our discussion on Rubber Soul. This was really fun. I think we should end these discussions with, would you recommend Rubber Soul?
Yes, I would recommend Rubber Soul to anyone who's never heard it before. If you've never, and I do know, that the world is full of folks who are well aware of the Beatles, possibly even annoyed about hearing so much about the Beatles, and haven't really listened through front to back any of the records. I don't know if I would say that this is my recommendation for the first one to listen to, but don't leave it out. I would say literally anybody, no matter what kind of music you like, no matter what kind of music you're into, and no matter what era of music that you're into, wholeheartedly, I would say you would enjoy and benefit listening to Rubber Soul in its entirety. Yes. What about you? What would you say? Would you recommend the Beatles' Rubber Soul to people?
No.